uh, the beginning can always go back and grab it, but we can use the time, and I'll just let you get going.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much, Will, for the opportunity of presenting FIWARE. Probably some of the people that are connected today are, fully aware of what we are doing, but, this slide deck basically is just for those who, don't really know about what the initiative is, just to have some takeaways about what we are doing in the community, okay? So I'm going to start okay, yeah. So I'm gonna just start, stating something that probably we all know. It's about, the relevance of the digital economy that that is having today, but also that it's probably will have in the near future. I mean, because you know that the digital life, it's all about the contact data that we are having today. It's like about all the collecting and processing this huge amount of data, which is going to be the fuel of the basically the digital economy. So it's about what's going on, where, when, and why. And it's actually the really core bone of the smart cities. I mean, data is actually applicable to any kind of a smart whatever application, but in the specific case of the cities, it's even more straightforward, because we can actually see, about the weather, about the transportation, about the road safety, if there are some incidences, or if there are a lot of, traffic jam. So all this information is actually coming from the data that we collect from the the context itself. So the problem that we are having today is actually about the silos of the information. As I was mentioning, if we actually split up the different vertical domains, and smart society, smart care, buildings, energy, and so on. I mean, all of them. The way in which we collect all this data is mainly through IoT, but in the market we will find plenty of protocols, standards, ways of processing the data. So at the end of the day, it's not just about how we collect the data or how we process the data, which is something that it's well advanced, but it's the main point is how we can actually break the silos of the information, how we can actually leverage the full power of this data. So somehow the benefits for fostering this data of economy is somehow we create a context of open innovation. I mean, for those of you who probably don't know what it's open innovation, it's about how we can actually, from an organization point of view, for example, from a company, how we can actually promote different ways of innovation, not only internally, but how we can actually leverage the resources from other partners. Is actually how we can include that knowledge into the streams of the company, and how we can actually share our knowledge to others. So all this data economy can actually help us to strengthen the cooperation with the partners. Going to the market faster and cheaper. On the other side, this open innovation will lead us to a non-vendor lock-in. And most of the cities probably are attached to really big contracts with vendors and really big providers. But if we can actually foster a community, an innovation community, where we can actually foster openness, we will actually create an ecosystem where we don't have to really rely on just one single provider, but in fact in a full-fledged community. Which actually will provide a larger market for the startups, especially and the small and medium-sized enterprises, to really reinforce and empower the market position. Not just the big guys, but also how actually the little ones can provide services to, for example, to cities, or they can actually try to get a better position in the market. So after all this background that probably you already are fully aware, I'm gonna touch base about what it's FIWARE. FIWARE is it just another software vendor or software provider, for example, like Amazon, web services, or like IBM? Well, in fact, FIWARE started like in 2010. Uh, Really driven by a huge flagship from the European Commission. The European Commission, along with some of the high-level industry partners from Europe, decided to invest throughout 8 years an amount of 500 millions in order to really to boost this economy of data. And how we can do it is actually it's about to really empower a community of different stakeholders, not just about the big guys, but also how academic partners can actually contribute to this digital economy of data, or how startups can can benefit from it, or how actually the big guys can the big guys like big telco operators or system integrators can actually play a different role through the open innovation with these other stakeholders. So at the end of the day, when you think of FIWARE, you shouldn't really think of just one single monolithic organization, but in fact a full community of different stakeholders. For example, my company, which is basically a small and medium-sized consulting strategic tech consulting company, is basically part of this community, but we are also members with the big tech operators from Europe, but at the same time with different startups. So at the end of the day, it's a big community, and this is probably the most important thing after all these years of initiative. So I just left here some numbers that actually, I mean, probably they're not the most updated ones, because I made these slides some time ago, but just for you to know a little bit more on terms of in figures. As I mentioned already, these $500 million coming from public but also private partnerships from the community. We are actually releasing 42 open source services that I will mention now in a moment. There are also more than 100 cities that have committed to this vision. As I mentioned, FIWARE is not just about how the big players can provide technology, but it's also how the end users, like cities and smart cities, can adopt these principles. Well, as I mentioned, I mean, more than 1,000 business ideas has been, fostered within the community. There are several innovation hubs and so on. So, okay, what are the principles behind the initiative? Okay, if you think of building block, like for example, like the Lego, it's basically it's quite simple. What about if we take reference open source technology like OpenStack, Docker, Hadoop, or CKAN, and we place on top of that technology a single and standard interface that somehow standardize the way in which manage the data that are beneath. So basically, this is what it's FIWARE services. We have on the one side reference open source technology, along with a standard interface for the context data. So we haven't done this by ourselves. I mean, we have basically teamed up with several, not only standardization bodies, but also, organizations that are working with standards especially in the smart city domain, like ETSI, Team Forum, but also our colleagues from NIST. And this is how a little bit we are related to GCTC somehow all these years. I mean, the both sides actually fit quite well, because we really believe in a common approach for this management of data. So what if we extend this one single FIWARE service into a platform? I mean, at the end of the day, this is what we get, different, like a toolkit of different FIWARE services, which is basically, as I mentioned, open source technology plus one single standard interface on top of them for managing the data in an unified way. So in this way, we can actually have modular services because we don't. I mean, the Commission, the European Commission, they decided not to invest in these technologies. So right now, these services are open source, but also are for free. When I say for free, it's not freemium or not. There is no, hidden modes behind. No, it's totally for free because again, it has been a huge investment from the European Commission, and all this public money has been served to really to develop and implement these services. So when you actually take a look at the open source references for the services, you will see that you can actually download it and start using it without any kind of fee. So as I was mentioning, you can take as many as you want because at the end of the day are for free, and you don't have to really download the full package and use all of them. No, you just use as many as you want. If you only like one, that's totally fine. So there are also one of the things that it's is at the core of the FIWARE vision is that it has to be interoperable with other, because we don't believe in a world where we just want to sell a vision. Is we understand that there are some legacy and some other partners are working, with Amazon, with Google Cloud, or even with IBM Lumix. So these services are interoperable with them, and they can be deployed in these platforms, and they basically target different vertical markets because they are cross sectors, and it doesn't matter. You can use the services for, if you are working with a smart city application, that's okay, but also if you work with energy or agri-food, that's also fine. So somehow it will depend highly on your business vision, and it will help you to really speed up the development phase. But given the fact that the relationship that we had with NIS, it's about more on the smart city sector. We really probably this slide is really focused on the smart city because probably is the domain where most of or the majority of the success applications that has been nurturing from the ecosystem are employing the technology. So again, just a small overview on the community. Right now, is there? Oh, okay. No, I thought it was a question behind. No. As I mentioned, I mean, all this started with the European Commission putting a lot of money here, but since it was last year, the European Commission decided to stop the public funding scheme and decided to create a foundation. And it's called, FIWARE Foundation. It's somehow like it's a non-profit organization that is somehow taking over of the community, and it will actually last longer than the European Commission limits can actually have. So the role model of this foundation is somehow similar to other open source initiatives, like for example Mozilla Foundation or Apache Foundation, where there are several, members associated to the foundation, like, several categories, like platinum members, where we have our colleagues also from NIC, from Japan, so somehow this is actually extending broader than Europe. And of course, we have also some other gold members, public members, and so on. You can actually take a look at more information about the foundation and the basis of the foundation in the website. So just for you to know, the slide is basically represented that right now the community is organized and is structured around this FIWARE Foundation, that is somehow hosting twice a year FIWARE Summit. We will have a FIWARE Summit next month. So in the website, you will have all the information if you want to come to Europe for a nice visit and actually get to know to the community. Okay, the FIWARE marketplace. So I was mentioning before that several companies and startups are using the FIWARE technology for their own purposes. So if you want to find all these companies, I mean, you can do it by, dropping if you want to get to know more about these companies, you can just let me know, and I will try to get in touch with them. But also, you can actually go to the FIWARE marketplace and browse about the different in the catalog. The marketplace is about a catalog of different providers, business providers, using FIWARE as an enabler. So they're not really selling FIWARE because it's not, as I mentioned, it's not the purpose behind, but they're using their business solutions, but they are certified by the FIWARE Foundation. So these guys actually are FIWARE by FIWARE. It's somehow a certification that ensures that these guys, are using in a proper the technology. Somehow it's for them, a way to promote themselves within the community, and somehow to have a label. Well, just an overview about the different activities that we have been doing throughout these years. I didn't mention, but I mean, I'm part of one of the members of the team who has been, pretty much working in the international outreach. So, as I mentioned, my main goal has been pretty much working with the US, and this is, how I get to know Wilf and the colleagues and the folks from GCTC, but given the fact that we have involved, some of the main telco operators like Telefonica, Orange, NIC, as I mentioned before, involved in this international vision. We have actually been able to go to several places in South America, several places in Africa, Asia, and so on. So again, I mean, this is just a snapshot of about the international average. There is not much information here, but I mean, if you are interested, just let me know, and I will share more information with you. So again, I mean, there is a lot of more information in the website. It's fiware.org, or if you want to drop an email, I'll be happy to share more information with you and try to create opportunities especially with the European community, or even Wilf has been committed to and interested to FIWARE since quite a long now. So I would say he's one of the one of the main advocates of FIWARE, especially in the West Coast. So he will also be a really good contact point about FIWARE and the opportunities that we may have here. So pretty much, Wolf, this is the few slides that I have for today. I don't know if there are, I mean, maybe we have some time for questions, or if you want to take the lead now.
Questions from anyone? Thanks for that. That was perfect. Let me start with a question. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, this is John Fink. Jose, could you comment about academic partnerships you might have, or university involvement in development and deployment of FIWARE?
Yeah, I didn't put it here in the members associated to the FIWARE Foundation. But if you go to the website, you will find all the full list of different partners associated to the foundation, including the universities. For example, I mean, right now I'm working for a consulting company. I was at University of Madrid, and they have been really involved in the concept of FIWARE since the really beginning. And they are also members of the foundation. So in academic approach, there is a lot of interest about how different data models can be used for several vertical sectors. So if you, I can easily link you with, especially with my colleagues in the Technical University of Madrid, because now I'm aware that they're working with several machine learning algorithms. Really, FIWARE itself has been really focusing on how we manage the data. But now the next step is somehow in the roadmap is how we can actually leverage all the power of the data, how we can actually use data mining, artificial intelligence on top of this unified data. So somehow these are, you know, the more research driven activities that are more or less now in the community.
Great, thank you. Actually, just to follow up, and Will, you or others could add on this. Portland has developed this Portland Urban Data Lake with 4 companies and a few universities. And I'm just wondering if there's some potential overlap between that effort, which involves Microsoft and Esri and a couple of other companies, and some of the FIWARE activities. This is it's set up as a data repository for a number of different data collection schemes within the city of Portland, and there's a lot of focus. I mean, in some ways, it may be parallel to what FIWARE is doing, but it would be nice if there was some learning that could go in both directions.
Would you mind to probably just, I don't know, maybe by email or maybe in the chat here, send me the link so I can it and maybe.
Yep, let me find
because
it.
For example, I mean, in Portland especially, Wilf is fully aware of that. I mean, we have been trying to work with the guys from Hack Oregon. It's the community, and you know, I really found every time that I've gone to Portland, I found a lot of you know, similarities on the approaches. It's just a matter of you know, sit down all together and try to, you know, see the best way, or maybe at least a starting point in which we can actually start working in a given project. You know, in most of the cases, a lot of people see the opportunity here, but I mean, it really what really costs the most, it's about the first step. So if we can actually find and probably open comms, it's probably a really good, you know, way to start that discussion. If we can find an opportunity in which someone in the FIWARE community and someone from the other side can actually find a common spot and start working on it, it's the way. I mean, you know, sometimes it's the toughest. It's the toughest step, but it's what it really takes to start working together.
Right. Okay. I posted the link on the chat thing there.
This is Yasunori Mochizuki NEC joining from Tokyo, and related to your question about academic contribution to the FIWARE community, I could summarize the 3 ways that academic members are working upon. The first is like the University of Madrid, they have been working very intensively on the system level aspect, also with the building blocks. Whereas in Europe, I observe also the regional universities tend to lead the technical leadership in building this smart city framework, and in those cases, universities are very in a mentor and also the designer type of the whole vertical, plus the city's platform. And in that case, many other cities have local universities working intensively on FIWARE smart cities. The third one is interesting, that even in the very early stage of FIWARE development, the European Commission also funded lots of vertical related projects like energy and manufacturing using FIWARE. And in those cases, early projects tended to be led by European academic leaders. And what's interesting, for instance, is the smart energy, which came back as one of the 4 pillars of FIWARE application. So it's now the leader coming from a University of Aachen who is really dealing the smart energy-oriented FIWARE development. So this is basically the 3 types of the academic contribution.
Thanks, that's very helpful. The other academic connection that we are interested in is using the campuses of universities as smaller test sites for the cities. So to try some things out on the campuses where there's more administrative control than in the city, but doing that in partnership with the city before deployments are broader in communities. And I don't know if there's potential for collaborating with FIWARE on some of that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Go ahead,
I just wanted to mention that, I mean, this this, I mean, the scenario in which you just mentioned, it's quite common, both in Europe, but also, I mean, I can remember about the case in Mexico City. I mean, they are, you know, somehow deploying some of the FIWARE applications that they are developing. You know, just to mention another example that it's not in Europe. I just don't want you to think of this as a European initiative, because now it's starting to get more and more global. The Tecnológico de Monterrey, which is, you know, one of the most important private universities from Mexico, they are deploying several smart transportation services to really create the best route for, you know, someone, but especially taking into consideration health and also weather conditions. So given the fact, I mean, putting, you know, your health status, for example, if you suffer from some, I don't know, asthma, or if you are suffering from some health conditions, along with the information taken from the weather stations, can actually recommend your routes, the best route to go from point A to point B. And they're starting to deploy these solutions within their campus in Mexico City. So they can actually then extrapolate the data scenario into, for example, a neighborhood within the city, or even at city level. So what you're referring is basically a really pilot or really test a scenario in which, especially in Europe, we are well aware of these kind of deployments, especially this pre-city deployment that is actually most of the cases driven by either universities or innovation hubs. You know?
Yeah. So we have a partnership with Tec de Monterrey and UNAM in Mexico City through a consortium based at Arizona State University. And if you could help connect us with the relevant people that are involved with FIWARE in Mexico City, that would be really helpful. We also in Europe are working with Dublin City University, Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, Lufana in Germany, and King's College. So if any of those have any links with FIWARE, we'd be interested in that as well.
Yeah, and in Tec Monterrey, I can really give you the perfect contact. I mean, the main contact point that has been driven the initiative from the Mexican side since the really beginning, 4 or 5 years ago. So I can really help you to find the right person there.
Thank you.
I believe there was some other comment or question that I'm sorry I interrupted.
Let me throw one in. So I think, and this is a little bit of an explanation here around how I'm sort of seeing the various parts go together, but I may be wrong. So feel free to correct me here, Jose. So right now I view FIWARE as having two key components, right? There's the system, right? Your cloud infrastructure that you've built, that you have various locations around the world that provide a FIWARE cloud. And then, but you don't need to use that, right? As you point out there, you can use AWS as your cloud infrastructure. So that's a first piece. And then on top of that, you've got this framework of modules that are application modules, right? They provide various kinds of functionality that are common and allow you to construct these IoT smart city services, and those can be run, as you point out, on AWS. And then I think there's a layer above that I think is still, so this is a question, because I think right above that is the key interoperability components. Things like, how do you define identity? How do you manage data? How do you conduct transactions, which we want to be common between the cities? And I don't know how far FIWARE has reached into that space. I would argue that maybe incorrectly, I would argue that the Portland Data Lake is an attempt within Portland to define how the city manages data, and could have been implemented in FIWARE. But I'm not sure yet, Jose, if you're proposing to cities how they manage data, or how they manage identity, or if you're just providing the framework and letting them decide that. Does that make sense to you as a way to frame it? And then,
yeah.
Okay. And
What?
Go ahead.
Yes, finish, please.
No, that was where the question was. So I'll leave it there, and please.
Yeah. Well, I mean, about the first question, which is about the cloud-based platform. I mean, as you correctly pointed out, one of the branches within the FIWARE vision was to provide a platform, a cloud-based platform, where you could actually deploy a full stack based on, especially in OpenStack. I mean, for those of you who are probably familiar with OpenStack, the version of this platform was actually tuned with OpenStack in order to support all the different FIWARE services along with the interface. But as you correctly pointed out, this is not needed. This is not mandatory. This is only one of the branches of FIWARE. I mean, FIWARE has several branches. Some of them more related to the management of data, some of them more related to the cloud hosting deployment of it. So as you correctly pointed out, you can actually take one of these services, which is not really based on OpenStack, and deploy it in AWS or IBM Linux or even in your local laptop. That's totally fine. So this is about the first question. The second question is about this common interface. Again, I mean, we didn't take, we didn't try to reinvent the wheel here. What we did here with this standard interface is, on the one side, we really took a look to what ETSI, specifically, I believe the industry working group was doing, and we adopted the reference API that they were providing, which is called NGSI, which is, I think it stands for Next Generation Standard or Smart Interface, something like that. I can't really give you more details, and even the reference on the website where now they even have a third release. So this is probably the most important thing: how we can adopt a common standard interface and start implementing smart services on top of that. But we didn't stop there. I mean, we actually tried to collect and work with other, not only standardization bodies, but organizations, with this same vision on how we can actually promote the use of a more harmonized data and data models. And this is how we, started to team up with TM Forum, but especially with NIST and their, task force related to. It was called IES-City, which is, besides GCTC, they started this task force along with other standardization bodies in order to extend best practices on how we can use, interfaces of data for, and try to break the silos that I was mentioning before. So I want you to take away something for today and for this presentation, is about this key component, about how we can, empower the smart applications through the same use of an interface, and the way in which the cities are adopting FIWARE and started to work with FIWARE is not about the cloud-based platform or the specific smart application on water management. No, it's about how we can actually promote the use of common standard interfaces like this one, and the way in which public solicitations from, for example, Spain is one of the main, some at the front runners of this FIWARE initiative, and there are several, city halls that are starting to mention explicitly in their public solicitations the use of FIWARE, but not as specific application. It's about the use of this NGSI API. This is probably the cornerstone of the equation, and where I would actually try to highlight that holds the whole power of FIWARE here.
This is Yasser Munchiz. Can I supplement further comments on what Will Fast? FIWARE basically has two hats. As Jose correctly points out, this is a platform, so the developers don't have to run around to find out other blocks, but many open source building blocks could be used on FIWARE, particularly when people think of IoT applications. On the other end, FIWARE's value proposition is centered around context information management, which is handled as NGSI, just as Jose mentioned. And so basic role of FIWARE is to enhance the interoperability of context information management in order to become compatible with the other software providers' offerings like AWS and so forth, even other types of other layers of platforms. And one interesting example is the data identity management and so forth. Of course, FIWARE does offer OAuth2 as the basic identification framework, but actually the identity management or data sovereignty actually has to be explored further. And actually, FIWARE has a collaboration with the International Data Spaces, which defines the generic architecture for the data sovereignty, which belongs, to my understanding, more into the policy rather than system. Of course, which is also very important to handle data in a secure and a trustworthy fashion. So at the policy level, FIWARE is working with multiple partners like International Data Spaces and also TM Forum, which also provides the data market APIs. So this is how the FIWARE is trying to focus its unique value proposition, whereas trying to make this offering compatible with the broader range of users. One interesting idea is offered by the Open Agile Smart City, which is rather a city network, is that what they claim is what's important is the minimal interoperability mechanism, because many cities have its own background and something that each city has already built. So what's important is to focus onto the critical common basis that makes the largest extent of the interoperability offerings, whereas not trying to exclude other type of software building blocks.
Thanks, that's really helpful. I don't know if that quite answers John's question. I think it does. I was going to add that there are next week, the week after next, we have the Eclipse Foundation coming in, and they have a framework as well that they've developed around IoT. And I think that the place where the interoperability happens, I think you're both saying this, is we need to get the what you've marked on this slide as the standard interfaces, things like definition of how we handle data, how we discover data, how we ensure identity. Because if those are common, then you should be able to use any good framework to implement and still have interoperability. And I think that's the end game, right? We want to be able to bring new services into a city and have them be discovered by existing applications or existing frameworks, and added as a service in the city. And in the place that needs commonality is in those standard interfaces. And I think you're right. In fact, Soku presented just last month on the IES-City framework. And I think that is a core component of how do we make sure that we're establishing that commonality, because I think it's the interoperability of these services that's the core to getting this market to really take off. Does that make sense? And Soku, I think you're on too. You've done a lot of work in this space.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Cool. John, does that answer your question? In other words, for the Portland Data Lake, it would be very nice if we were learning things about how Portland is handling data, so as we can inform the definition of these standard interfaces. But there are a lot of those efforts around. We need to take the best of them, and I think, you know, the IES-City framework gathered a lot of that information, take the best of what's out there, and come to an agreement about what the implementation that we will collectively advocate that will have interoperability. I mean, I think all of us, certainly, we get asked a lot by cities about how they should do this, and the problem is there are many ways they could do this. So, you know, it's not about inventing necessarily what those interfaces are, but understanding what the cities need and trying to define a minimum set of functions that allow that kind of interoperability to happen, while letting, you know, the cities decide on what frameworks they want to use, and how they want to implement. As long as they implement around those interfaces, things should interoperate. That's the hope.
Yeah. So can I chime in on this too?
Yes.
This is Matthew Yarger from the IOTA Foundation. So it seems like FIWARE has a lot of the processing layer and the upper layer for that data management, but the lower layer of how to validate and attribute the data from the sources is kind of what's missing with this context data standard interface. And that's the kind of thing that we've been focused on from the IOTA Foundation, is creating that data validation from the source and embedding down into embedded devices and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's like an interesting layering here that we can do to where we could assist with the lower level of that context data validation and attribution, and then add the FIWARE layering stack on top of what we're building from that low level perspective regarding data management and digital identities and all that kind of stuff, because we actually have a lot of progress over this decentralized identification mechanism that we're integrating to actually attribute and structure the data from source with multiple layers of compartmentalization and segregation when necessary. So,
yes, I think I understand where you're going. So, and we've certainly run into that, and I think there are a number of efforts to do that. In other words, the data store ought to be validated, and you should be able to take things out of the data store knowing that they have a provenance that ensures them. So if you come to my data file and pull out my bank account, it should be validated against my bank, so you know that that's actually what my bank balance is. So, I mean, that's a very trivial example, but that would then allow these services to function, that when you bring an electric scooter into the city, you shouldn't have to write a whole application. It should appear in your multimodal transit app as a new service. And in order to do that, data would have to be validated within the stores that are being used. So I think that's exactly right. That's one of the things, and I don't think it's that we don't know how to do it. I think that we need to not only come up with a good, efficient, scalable mechanism, but we need to try and have some commonality about how it's implemented. So when people write applications, they don't have to have, you know, they can implement it one time and use those identification and validation mechanisms.
Yeah, and I mean, we're completely open source with open APIs and everything as well. So we kind of have that intrinsic mechanism for allowing them a central, decentralized connection capability, so they can get easily integrated in new environments. And we're testing that with mobility here in the city of Austin. We're testing that with energy through the City Exchange Consortium, doing positive and negative energy districts and energy sharing. And we're doing digital identities in Taipei and Taiwan. So we're in all those different verticals. And we're also working on the data marketplace with Team Forum as well, which is an interesting overlap between what we're doing and FIWARE is doing. So, yeah.
So I think the next step for us is to define what those modules are. I took an initial stab at it with, it may be entirely wrong, but it's at least the start. So identity needs to be common. We need to know how to interact on identity. We need to be able to probably have some form of transaction record, probably immutable. I don't think it needs to be global. I think it can be by community. We need to have some mechanism by which we define what the transaction is, something like a digital contract. And then we need to have the data store itself, right? I don't know whether that's sufficient. And I think what we want to do is to start to set up, first of all, collectively agree, is that sufficient or are there other services? It probably is. I mean, even, without thinking about it too much, I can think, well, discovery of services also is something we probably need to have that's common. But we need to define what those things are and then set up teams to come up with the best method that we have available and collectively agree to that, right? So we want to limit the innovation as little as possible, right? We want people to be able to go in different directions, use different frameworks, come up with different applications and explore the space. But we do want them to be interoperable. So what's the minimum set of service interoperability? And then as a group, we should be able to move those in a managed way that maintain interoperability while leaving all of us free to go and develop services and deliver them to cities in ways that are productive and additive and not just islanded. Does that make sense?
Probably. I mean, just thinking out loud, would it make sense? In terms of interoperability, would it make sense if I can actually send you the link for this NGSI API, which is, as I mentioned, if we don't, if we try to extrapolate from the service itself, and we really take what is the most important thing, which is this standard interface. Maybe it would be helpful for the team if I send you the reference for this NGSI API, so we can actually try to start from there.
Yes, I think that would be good. I'm collecting these things on the wiki, and people feel free to both use them and add to them. I think at the moment I've got things like the IES-City framework document pointers out there, but we could start to build out and anybody who thinks that there is a relevant standard or a relevant framework for this kind of to sort of set the foundation here, that would be great. So I'd be happy to post that and to take a look at it. I do think that the challenge is that there are going to be several of these, right? I think we're at the stage now where most of the challenges have been solved by somebody, and many of those people are on this email chain and attending these meetings. And so what we're trying to do is to agree, because I don't think there's a need for us to innovate in these spaces, and if we can collaborate in these spaces, I think it accelerates the market. It allows us then to develop services that we can sell worldwide without having to do special customized solutions everywhere. So that I think is the main goal of what we're doing.
Wilf, this discussion actually reminds me of the conversation that was there right a second before this session opened. And as Jose points out, FIWARE Summit is taking place in May 21st, 22nd in Genova, Italy. And there are a lot, of course, there are high-level talks, but we also have a lot of tech-specific sessions, as well as we have a lot of tech steering committee members who knows all the details and the more expert view of the building blocks, and who must be ready to work on this deep dive of discussions, if you like. And if you or anybody from this Portland community could join this event, which is taking place in just a month, then you'll be much quicker to learn what aspect will be compatible with your own idea, and even you may be also able to give some idea back to the FIWARE Foundation system experts.
If you'd send me a link to that, I'll start posting those on the website too. I'm not sure I can get out there for the 21st of May, but I certainly encourage anybody who can to join.
Yeah, anybody interested in this Portland community will be all welcome to join this event. And if it makes sense, I'll tell the CEO of the foundation or those core members to think about putting this some private or internal deep dive tech session during this summit. I'll send, or of course, Jose can also send the link. I'll send send it after I sleep, right after the session, to you how to join this event.
And we should also, you know, I don't know how applicable the session you've already got on the 10th of June in DC is to this, Jose. But it would be good to do to see if we can at least get any of us from this group together while we're in DC. I'll certainly be there. I know Saku will be there, and you're going to be there. So there's probably a pretty good group that will be there.
Yeah, I mean, about the session on July 10th, it is not just about FIWARE. It's actually about a much broader, you know, discussion on the digital economy and how Europe and the US can cooperate. But of course, I mean, anyone that is, I mean, we will for sure that we will address the point of interoperability as one of the main, you know, right now the main barriers, but also the opportunities that we have if we, you know, tackle that that drawback of interoperability that will create for the digital economy. So we will discuss about this and other topics on, you know, on the workshop that we will host on July 10th, along, you know, the day before of the GCTC Expo. So anyone that is, you know, happy to, you know, to get to know some of the best minds also from Europe and the US, it's more than welcome. I can send you more information about the workshop.
That sounds good. And,
yeah.
and
FIWARE also send a group of people from Europe to join GCTC. So it's although it's in July, it's also possible to discuss some technical aspects into detail. That's possible.
Right. No, I think that'd be good. It would be good to move this forward, and maybe we should be looking to see if there is a session specifically on this. And Saku, I don't know if there's still space there to do anything, but I think something around the digital city platform and IES-City framework would probably be a good session. Is there something already happening, or should we be thinking about that?
So the FIWARE, well, it's not only FIWARE. There is a session that Jose suggested is actually a pre-conference, and I forgot the exact name of the organization, but that's sort of like digital next generation internet. Jose,
yeah,
am I correct? Yeah.
Yeah, it's about the next generation internet, and it's, as I mentioned, it's a think tank on how we can foster cooperation between Europe and the US. As I mentioned, it's much broader than FIWARE, but for sure we will address topics like interoperability and data management. Yeah.
Right. So that's confirmed, and then you can have this discussion as part of that workshop, or if you want to, we can create another additional workshop on the pre-conference day, and it's just it's simply just a matter of adding 1 more hour to the schedule. So that's not really a big deal. So pre-conference day, we have still have rooms left to have those type of discussions.
I think that might be really good. I'll work on that, and we can bring that up in future sessions here. But I think something to you know, to sort of keep this effort moving forward would be great. So, other questions for Jose? Thanks so much, Jose. This was perfect, and it set up the right dialogue. And I think in 2 weeks from now we'll have Michael in talking about the Eclipse Foundation and what they've been doing to build a framework here too. And I think the same issue will come up, right? What is that interoperability layer of components that we need to have common? Other questions? Well, this was great. I was going to go on and do a little bit more, but we've pretty much used up the time. So if there's no more questions, I'll wrap it up at this point. I say in 2 weeks, Michael will come in from the Eclipse Foundation and do an update on framework. I think that'll be very helpful too. And I'll work with you, Sakwu, to see if we want to do something on July 10th as a pre-event workshop.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Excellent.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.